My sister, Rausa, and I are Janie and Blair's cousins. Our father was Aunt Mary's brother. Speaking for both of us, I will start with some comments from Rausa and will finish with my own reflections on Aunt Mary. So starting with Rausa's words, it is safe to say that Aunt Mary was the person with whom I have had the longest relationship. Not yet married, we lived in the same household when I was born. In the last birthday card she sent me, just last October, she wrote how she would wake the infant me and give me my bath and get me all ready for my mother. She and Uncle Don were our second set of parents. Every Sunday, after church, Mom, Dad, Ann, and I would go to their house in Rochester, or she and Uncle Don would come to the farm. It was a given that we would spend every holiday with them, and when it came to Christmas presents, I would look forward to Aunt Mary's because they would be a bit unusual. I remember going on camping trips with them in their pop-up camper. They taught me how to make a camper's breakfast, and Uncle Don was a great barbecuer. Another time they took Ann and me to a fancy restaurant, and we were excited, and we kept asking Aunt Mary, "How soon until we get there?" She said to count to 100, and we were there before we even got to 50. She had such patience. Ann and I were practice kids before Jane and Blair. As Jane and Blair grew, we still had our weekly visits, and I eventually turned into a babysitter. And one time, Aunt Mary and Uncle Don came in from an outing. Aunt Mary remarked that I had every light in their house turned on, and even the globe, and she laughed at that. Time passed, and they moved to Covington, Georgia when I was a senior in college. My first plane ride was visiting them. I had my first experience with a computer with Aunt Mary showing me how to play the Oregon Trail, and she and Uncle Don welcomed me when I visited with my year-old son when he loved playing in their pool. It must have been on the same trip when I was mending some clothing, and she sat at the table with me and we talked and reminisced. She gave of herself. She didn't want the bond we built as children to weaken as we grew older, and she would call every couple of weeks. She and Uncle Don even visited me in Newville when I had a hip replacement. There are too many good memories to list. I saw her last in September 2018 when my husband and I celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary with a trip to Hilton Head Island. And the family included a celebration of Aunt Mary's 90th birthday, too. She was an integral part of my life, and I will always be grateful for knowing her. And now I will speak for myself. As Rausa said, Aunt Mary was always a second mother to us. She was always interested in our lives, coming to piano recitals, getting to know my friends, sharing a book I would find interesting, and documenting important moments. Aunt Mary had a camera and was not afraid to use it. There were 10 years between Rausa's birth and when Janie was born. So she had time to take many, many pictures of Rausa and me as we grew up. These pictures were developed as slides. And there was often a slideshow at one of the family holidays with the usual narration of stories associated with the slides. And one of the slides of Rausa ended up in a magazine devoted to preserving memories from the past. My mother said that if anything ever happened to these slides, a part of her would go with them. In the early 1950s, a gang was formed, not from the streets, but made mostly of couples, husband and wife teams from our church. The gang started with 2 Eckharts, which is Aunt Mary and my dad, 2 Kreps, and 2 Douglases, and the gang grew from this core of families. There were 2 main events each year, the 4th of July and the New Year's Eve celebration. 4th of July was always held at my dad's farm since he was the only farmer and needed to complete the daily chores. Families came and brought food to share, but the annual hit was the barbecued chicken that Uncle Don would make. The New Year's Eve party, however, was for only couples and did not include the kids and was hosted by a different gang member each year. The traditions continued for many, many years, even after the children were grown and families started to move out of the area. And Aunt Mary was one of the 2 last remaining members of the gang. One gang member, Donna Krebs, was also a very close, lifelong friend of Aunt Mary's. As it happened, one of Donna's daughters, Debbie, has been a very close, lifelong friend of mine. Aunt Mary and I shared stories of how meaningful these relationships have been for both of us. And it was a particularly poignant moment when Donna and her husband Chuck were visiting Aunt Mary and Uncle Don. Donna was with Aunt Mary when she suffered a fatal asthma attack during this visit. Some friendships last so much longer than a lifetime. As a second mother, Aunt Mary came to many big events in our lives, particularly when Mom and Dad were unable. She came to the high school graduation for my son, the wedding of my daughter, and the wedding of Rosa's son, and when I was married in 2016. As Mom and Dad's health declined dramatically, we moved them to live in the same town as Rosa. Aunt Mary and Uncle Don came to the rescue, and the three of us cleaned out Mom and Dad's home in order to get it ready to sell. That was a Herculean task, but Aunt Mary and Uncle Don were there. It is just what family does. Aunt Mary was not afraid to try new things and was an early computer user and was on Facebook before me. When my children posted to Facebook, my first thought would be, what would Aunt Mary think? She was the voice in my head of compassion and conscience to do the right thing. And she was an inspiration to respond to the need of others, not only in our community, but around the world. Inspired by her service to others, I had an opportunity to go to Honduras with my church. And during my return trip, I had a layover for several hours at Atlanta, and I used the time to call Aunt Mary so we could share our experiences, hers in Nicaragua and mine in Honduras. When Aunt Mary's health started to decline this fall, COVID prevented us from visiting her. However, when Janie moved her to her home with hospice, my husband David and I were in our car and drove from Kansas to Hilton Head to say goodbye. And I will leave you with the last words that we shared with each other. I love you.